Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
And I'm Nahal Toosi. It's Wednesday, June 18th.
And this is the Playbook podcast. And as you can hear, Dasha Burns is not with us this morning. I'm delighted, though, that we've got Nahal Toosi with us. Hello, Nahal. Nahal is our senior foreign affairs correspondent here at Politico and author of the Compass column. So what better person to be joining us in a week like this? Nahal, you must be having a very busy week indeed.
It is relentless. I was asking my editor earlier, I was like, can we just get 5 minutes worth of a break? Just 5 minutes?
Nobody gets 5 minutes break at the moment, unfortunately. Okay, let me talk us quickly through the three main stories driving the day before we get into the big thing everyone's talking about in DC, everyone talking about it around the world. The situation in Iran, at the time we are recording this, we are still waiting to see what action Donald Trump is going to take as Israel and Iran continue to trade blows. We will get into that in just one moment. Two other headlines just to flag for you this morning. Lots and lots of conversation in DC as well about immigration following the arrest yesterday of the New York City mayoral candidate Brad Lander, arrested by ICE. Of course, follows Senator Alex Padilla being handcuffed last week by federal agents as well. And that is going to dominate a lot of conversation, especially on the Hill today. The third thing that's going to be big news domestically is the economy, because the Fed Chair Jerome Powell will be announcing the latest news on interest rates today, and he'll be holding a press conference this afternoon. And you can probably expect to hear Donald Trump mouthing off about him being too slow at lowering interest rates once again. But let's face it, there's only one big story in town today, Nahal, and it's a story we've been following all week. We're still waiting for a decision from Donald Trump. He spent much of yesterday in the Situation Room with his closest advisors. We wondered if last night might be the night that the US decided to start its own attacks. That doesn't seem to have happened as far as we can tell. What's the latest situation as you see it this morning?
I think the odds are pretty good that the president will decide to join Israel in its fight against Iran. My experience usually is that when there are leaks saying that a president is considering doing something, that means a decision's already been made. But we don't know about the timing, right? So whether it happens now or a few hours from now or whenever, I think that President Trump seems really inclined at this moment to go ahead and give Israel the big bombs that they want to really take out Iran's nuclear facilities that are buried deep underground. And I think part of it is that he just kind of sees this as a way to really set Iran back and maybe actually buy some time in terms of the nuclear program.
Extraordinary that we find ourselves on the cusp of this, given all of the time that Donald Trump has spent over the past 12 months. In fact, realistically, over the past 12 years, probably talking about the folly of America going into the Middle East, all those, as he would have put it, pointless overseas conflicts, all that wasted life. And here we are, and you're telling us this morning that we can expect to see another American president doing that. Are you surprised at the way this has developed over the last few weeks that it's got to this point?
I'm not entirely surprised. And I know that sounds strange, but it's because you can't think of this stuff in a very binary way. You can't say, okay, there's not going to be a war with Iran, or there is going to be a war with Iran, right? And I don't think the president thinks of it in a binary way. Just because the United States carries out one major strike or helps Israel carry out one major strike in Iran doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to get entangled any further. A lot of things might happen that could lead the president to say, okay, well, we gave you this one thing. You got rid of this particular nuclear facility or another one, and we're done. I mean, he doesn't necessarily see these things in black and white. And I think that that's really important to remember. Let's not forget that during his first term, he carried out strikes against Syria and Bashar Assad because of chemical weapons use. And that did not lead the US to invade Syria. That's a bit more complicated than that, but you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. I know you're talking to experts on the Middle East who think about this stuff all the time. They wargame out different ideas. Is it realistic to think that the US could fly in, take out this one particular facility buried in the mountainside south of Tehran, get out, and that would be the end of it? Because there's just a sort of sense, I guess, a concern. You see it particularly amongst some of President Trump's most ardent supporters, that once you cross that line and you start to do something like this, these things tend to take on a life of their own. Do you think that's necessarily the case?
I think it's a very legitimate concern to have, right? But I also don't think it necessarily means that it's going to play out one way or another. I don't believe the doomsday scenarios on either side. I do think these things tend to be very messy and usually end up somewhere in the middle. And a lot of it is going to depend on how the Iranian regime reacts. And a lot of it's going to depend on how the Israelis react. If the Iranians, for instance, decide we're going to attack American bases and we're going to escalate this further, then yes, the US might find itself drawn in. But if the Iranians say, you know what, maybe we won't carry out a meaningful strike or any strike at all that targets Americans, then maybe we do have just this one-off situation where the US does this one thing. Remember, this stuff is never black and white.
There's been an awful lot spoken, written about this one particular nuclear facility that the Iranians have buried deep in this mountainside. Do you agree with the analysis that if the US does get involved, that would be its role? Would that be your expectation, that it is this one specific thing, that America has the one specific military ammo to go after?
Well, there's Fordo. This is the one you're talking about. And there's also Natanz. That one's also got underground facilities. So there could be two things, but Fordo is the one that people are most concerned about. It's buried the deepest, and it's considered a particularly prime target. I would think that that's really the big thing in terms of what Israel would need US help on. It's this underground stuff. But I also want to point out one other thing, which is Israel may have capabilities we're not necessarily aware of. That doesn't mean they have the big bomb that they need, but they could, for instance, have a lot of people that they've penetrated inside the Iranian regime who could help them carry out a number of actions, covert actions, that could damage or disable many of these facilities, even if they are underground.
America's allies are watching on rather nervously. Some of the main leaders were sort of left stranded in Canada, weren't they, after President Trump flew home on Monday night. We heard from French President Emmanuel Macron yesterday warning against any effort to what he called do a regime change in Iran, to actually push all the way and push the Ayatollah out of power. Do you think there are people within the US administration, maybe within the Israeli administration, who want that? Or is the general collective view that this is very specifically about nuclear capability and that's the end of it?
So it's interesting. Macron actually said he opposed violent regime change, which was very interesting kind of thing. It's like, well, so you're not opposed to regime change in principle.
Right.
But I do think for sure that for many countries around the world, if the Iranian regime were to fall, they would be quite happy. And that includes Israel, of course, the United States, but also plenty of Arab countries and others that are right now telling Israel to back down, to de-escalate. Same thing for a lot of European countries. Iran does not have a lot of friends. Even the Russians, who are friends of the Iranians, they're not exactly rushing in to help, are they? So this regime has made a lot of enemies, and I think a lot of people will be very happy to see it go. But the big question then is what comes after? And it's like a Pandora's box.
Is that surprising to you? Because I had always felt that there was a sort of measure of protection for the Iranian regime coming from Russia and indeed from China as well. And yet here we are with the most extraordinary targeted strikes against the leadership having been carried out over the past few days. And as you say, not really a whisper from Putin. We're not seeing really very much from China either. Is that surprising? Would you have expected them to be more involved?
I'm not surprised that the Chinese aren't playing a bigger role. I mean, they will be hurt if they're not able to access Iranian oil over time, but they'll find other ways. Russia, on the other hand, I think the Russians have a lot of their own problems right now. And we saw that they didn't do much in Syria when the regime there fell. They've got to deal with Ukraine. They've got other issues. And what are they going to do? Like really rush in to help Iran? There's also still the possibility that the regime in Iran will survive this. Officially speaking, regime change is not the objective of the Israeli operation, but they have made it very clear that they wouldn't mind seeing it happen. And they're kind of putting the onus on the Iranian people to rise up and try to take down what's left of this regime.
As we sit here thousands of miles away in DC, sort of wargaming this out and trying to predict the next few days ahead, it's easy to forget that there are people trapped right in the middle of this. And I know that's something very close to your heart and your life as well, Nahal. Do you want to give us just some sense of what the picture is like actually on the ground in Iran at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I am Iranian American and I have family in Iran. And again, there's people caught up in Iran, in Israel. There are actual people with ordinary lives, regular folks who are now trying to figure out if they have to leave Tehran or whatever city they're at. There's shortages of fuel. We've been trying to contact relatives, and sometimes, quite often, we can't get through because the phone lines are overwhelmed. And I know many Israelis are also caught up in this. So it's a very difficult time. And it's also, we often talk, especially at Politico, we tend to talk to the power players, the policymakers. But, at the end of the day, it's ordinary people whose lives are at stake here. And it's really important to remember that.
And easy to forget as well that the Iranian leadership, not exactly universally popular in Iran, it's fair to say as well. And we've seen enough evidence of that over the years.
I think many Iranians would be really happy to see the regime fall, but I also think many Iranians are really worried that what's going to happen is a Gaza-like situation where, much of their country is left in utter ruins, and they're really scared about that as well.
All right. I think we'd better leave it there. Nahal, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate that. And thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
That's all we've got time for on today's show. We have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. And we'll be back tomorrow. Have a great Wednesday.